Thanks, Fiona. Thanks for everyone for tuning in on a Thursday. And yeah, I really enjoy doing this. Change of brand, but I don't know. My jokes are probably going to still be the same. But yeah, so basically, the brief was autumn animal health, and I just thought of, what are the things I'm thinking about and seeing throughout New South Wales. I'm really lucky that we've got clients up into Queensland and down into Bendigo, for our on-farm stuff and further afield, and so you get to see some pretty cool stuff. But I think the fundamentals are still the fundamentals. So we'll kick it off. So for anyone who doesn't know who I am, I'm Tim Gold's my name. I run a business called For Flock's Sake. So our purpose is really to help producers grow their best sheep and make every year winner. And we kind of do that through health genetics data, and with the kind of concept that once we've got animals healthy, they can express their true genetics, and we can use predominantly EID and data recording to find they're really like the performers and underperformers in our business. It's been a really exciting, this business is about to turn 1st of July, so been a super exciting time since my veterinary glory days at Warren and Ningen, and we've almost going to crack 400,000 breeding ewes in our client base, so it's exciting to see the sheep industry and see people passionate about sheep. So the three big ones I wanted to kind of cover off today, because we're kind of, there's people, people coming up to landmarking, but still people, scanning or at the tail end of that. So I want to think about, internal parasites. There are eternal foe in the, in the sheep game. I was explaining to someone the other day, why one of the many reasons why sheep are better than cattle is because, we start stacking things up, we can really get some good compound interest in our production systems. But we get the highs of the highs, but we also get the lows of the lows, and we see that, mass, I suppose, parasite challenges, we don't typically see that, or mortality events. We don't typically see that in the cattle industry. So we know that we get the highs, but also particularly for worms, we can get the lows if we get, let those things get away on us. I'm going to talk about, debriefing some scanning results and how I think about that. And, just going into our landmarking checklist for a lot of people who'll be not far off landmarking. So for, when I think about worm biology, this is kind of how I conceptualize it in my head, is that, we've got kind of like the, I suppose the the axis of evil might not be the right word, but basically the kind of different factors, when we think about parasitology, and particularly at this time of year, so we've got some host factors, and the host is naturally our sheep. We've got worm factors, and we're going to talk about that. Environmental factors are currently occurring. We've got the temperature range we're currently experiencing, like Fiona and I were talking before this about, in the New England haven't even had a frost yet, which is, really interesting. Central West here in Dubbo, again, we've had some pretty mild periods. So we've got some interesting temperatures. We'll talk about the autumn break. We've got the dews on the pasture and also the worm burden. And whenever I see, think about the biological impacts of these, I'm always thinking about where can I influence? Where can us as sheep producers influence these? What's a controllable, and what is things we don't have a control over? So this is straight out of the Worm Boss website, which is a great resource for people looking for some general knowledge. And this is just the kind of the life cycle of our roundworms. And this is when I think about the worm factors. Some, eggs have different ranges, and currently right now across large parts of New South Wales, the worm factors, so their ability to produce in the environment, and then we've also got what are environmental factors, because they all kind of work together. We think about from there, in their life cycle, we've got the dung stage, so when the worms have been passed, then we move on to the pasture stage. When we've got contamination of pasture with the L3 larvae, and then we've got, we've got some high parasite loads, or ability to get high parasite loads in ewes, because we've got some, host factors. We know that heavily pregnant ewes, their immunity drops during the tail end of pregnancy, and so the ability for worms to get a bit of a move on at that tail end of pregnancy is up because their system's got a lot of hormonal influences. So that's what I would call a host factor. And also what I think about, when I'm thinking about worms currently is that, we know that L3s will survive, and L3s is just a fancy way for saying the worm on the pasture. L3s will survive in pasture as a general rule, 3 months in summer and 6 months in winter. I've put the asterisks because it's like one of those it all depends questions. If we have really mild summers or really mild winters, then these, the rules of thumb, worms don't read the textbook. The rules of thumb can really extend it out. So, the upside of really dry conditions is it really hammers worms. But the downside of really good seasons is it just allows our worm populations to hang in there for much longer than maybe we'd expect. So again, that's the dung stage, pasture stage, and then back into the host stage. So they're ingested by the sheep. The L3 becomes the worm inside, and then it can lay the eggs. And so this kind of cycle can 3 weeks to go around. And again, back to that host stage, the rise, the periputient rise of the worm count from immunity going down is a host factor. But also I think of the host factor as our weaners. For people who have lambed and coming up to weaning, our weaners are high needs animals, and because of that, we've got to take care of them and provide environment that hasn't had a lot of worm activity. So that can be a real challenge, particularly if we've got a bit of stocking rate and we're trying to get some things happening in our business. So these are how I think about the host factors and the environment, putting it all together. So who's the enemy? Now, this is terrible audio. Please block your ears. This is me self-commentating a post-mortem I did on a weaner at Cumnock last year, maybe the year before. But basically, it just shows you that classic Barber's Pole look. Barber's Pole, I think of Barber's Pole being in central west New South Wales as the core enemy. They're blood suckers. Their ideal temp, revision is 22 to 30 degrees. But this is where Barber's Pole really step it up, is that they have an ability to lay 10,000 eggs per day, which is epic, which shows why we can go from zero to absolute chaos when this worm is occurring in our paddocks. And so we take our finger off the pulse and we're in a lot of trouble. Signs we're all familiar with: the pale gums, bottle jaw, weakness, death. As a side note, there is another cause of anemia called mycoplasma ovis. The vets online will be familiar with this. So we've got weak anemic sheep. We need to get some proof, some evidence that it's a worm burden, or we could be dealing with something else. Oh, sorry, get out of that. Okay, so number one, Barber's Pole, public enemy number one, sheep enemy number one. The black scour worm is another one. Again, it's got an ideal working range, and then interesting, can lay 300 eggs per day. So look at the difference in the ability to scale up production losses, 10,000 eggs per day to 300 eggs per day. They're winter dominant. These ones don't cause the anemia, they cause damage to intestines. So we see that more as scours, weight loss, and lethargy. And of course, the brown stomach worm. Again, 15 to 23 degrees is its optimum working environment. Again, can lay 100 eggs per day. So not nearly as prolific as the Barber's Pole. Winter dominant, damages the abomasum, which is one of the internal stomachs. Clinical signs: low weight gains, lethargy, reduced appetite. So these are more insidious production losses, but they do cost us. Interesting enough, some of the worms, particularly the Osteotargias, have been really causing a lot of damage in young weaner cattle or young heifers currently. So I've seen some really interesting cases and some really significant production rebounds from getting on the attack and getting it sorted. So this is the kind of window we're on. We've kind of got a little bit of perfect opportunity for just about every worm, particularly on the shoulders of this if we're having mild seasons. One thing I kind of learned over the last couple of years is I kind of feel rightly or wrongly, is a little bit with this species, with this calendar as it presents, and this is from the Zoetis website, is that it's a little bit all bets are off. We've had some really mild periods over the last couple of years, and so I think when I think about Barber's pole being a purely summer worm, I don't think that holds true nearly as much. Certainly I've got clients, within 50 k's of Dubbo who had Barber's pole counts, coming through in June last year. So again, it's one of those things. We just need to keep our finger on the pulse and stay close to it. So what are we thinking weather-wise now? This is Dubbo, highs March, April, May. You see these temperatures here. It's going to get a bit cooler now, but you can see this has been pretty good temperatures for just about all the worms. We've had a bit of rain as well. So, we're ticking all the boxes for perfect autumn conditions. Like, it's going to be great. We get some feed coming through, a bit of clover and things like that. But also, when we get these good opportunities, so do the worms. And it's just an opportunity because we don't want to give away weight gain for free. And that's what worms take away from us. We want to stay on the attack. And so this is, again, I think, again, I've pinched this from the Zoetis website, but I just like it because it's got here this purple graph, which is like subclinical effect, which is the fancy way of saying effects of production we can't see. So by the time we see clinical effects, which is what we can see, we've actually got quite a large scale of production losses. And I often think about, if I've got some cracking lambs growing at 300 grams a day and I get a high worm burden, let's say 1,000, and I lose 100 grams of production a day. This is not losing weight. This is just not getting what I should have got. I think, 100 grams a day times 7, that's 700 grams of live weight. What are we yielding? 48, 49%, somewhere in there. So we're looking, it could be 300 grams of carcass weight we're losing, and so we're at $6 a kilo. Then suddenly that we can kind of see that really starts adding up per head per week. That's the opportunity cost, the things we don't get that we could otherwise get. So we know worms are doing that. So what's the plan going forward? The best chance is just know thy enemy, and that's fecal egg counts. It's the quickest and easiest way to get a feel for what's going on. Your 4 main options, collect the sample, send it to, there's a couple of really good labs getting around. In clinic or in store, a lot of rural resellers have ability to do on-site fecal egg counting, so do a lot of vet clinics. You can upskill yourself and do it on farm. And of course, you can get machines like the FecPack, which are pretty cost effective to have on farm as well. And they'll do a little bit of that heavy lifting for you. But the biggest thing when I come back to worms, I think about is that we've got to make sure our sample size is appropriate, because we know if we don't get enough samples, then we can get, sampling error. For anyone who's done lifetime ewe management online, we know that when we get the lifetime ewe app out, typically we want to get to 50 sheep, and we see the average stabilize once we get to 50 sheep. You can start pressing some crazy numbers at 50 sheep and the averages don't change, because we've got some statistic stability. Same with fecal egg counting. If you're only getting, 3 or 4 samples, we could either get extremely high counts, or we could get, worst case, extremely low counts when actually the average is much higher. So what's the answer? More testing. Get bigger sample size. I think collecting 15 to 20 samples and 3 to 5 pellets from each sample. So it's got to be the same volume. Because if I get 10 pellets from one sheep and I get 3 from another, then this one's got a lot more weighting on my number. So I see sampling error as something that is a real challenge, and sometimes it knocks our confidence as producers and the caretaker of sheep on how accurate they are. So I get when we've got some of our own sheep as well, and this is my answer to this question: frequency beats accuracy. If it doesn't make sense, do it again. Fecal egg counting, if you send it away to the DPI or any of the private labs, like it's not big investments. So if it doesn't make sense, do it again, or do it regularly. Again, the more times I can do it, and that's why I got a little picture of the, the highway there with the guardrails. Fecal egg counting is your guardrails. So in a wet summer period, I'd be thinking doing it every, 2 or 3 weeks, maximum 4 on every mob, because I want to make sure that I'm staying in the middle of the road. that if I'm heading towards the guardrail, if I do this regularly enough, even if I get a little bit of, variation in my counts and a variation in my accuracy, I do it regularly enough, the frequency will beat the accuracy, and I'll make sure I don't get caught out, because that's the worst thing. What's some general rules? Again, this is from the Worm Boss website, and you can see here actually at greater than 60% Barber's pole, the worm counts are actually quite small. I quite like this in some regards, because what we're doing is we're trying to keep production losses low, but I'm also trying to think about my contamination in my paddocks. I'm trying to keep that low as well, because this is what I found, in high stocking rate, high, good environments for worms, is that, it's hard to drench a paddock. I also get a question asked all the time, like, how do we manage the paddock, contamination? And there's no really easy answer. Cattle, maybe, grazing with cattle certainly provides some options to, trying to hoover up some eggs, paddock spelling. But the challenge with paddock spellings is oftentimes if we've got high producing pastures or lucens or something like that, we've got a production goal and an animal health goal. A lot of the time, or most of the time, they actually run in parallel, but sometimes they actually are antagonistic, because we've got an excellent high value pasture. We might not be able to spell it for that long, because we need to take advantage of it. So, from this picture here, I think I've got 1,000 eggs in my sheep. I drench them, and we know that the only way to, 2 ways to tell if a drench works is do a fecal egg count reduction test, 14 days later, or do a drench resistance testing. And we know that we should be, getting, 98% kill rate. So I start at 1,000, I should end in 20. But we know in our paddock, if I start at 1,000, I ended at 1,000, the same day. So that's why, in my mind, particularly when we're trying to, play a high stocking rate game and get the best out of our pastures, I don't want to let my paddocks get to significant levels, because it means when I go back in there, or I have to send a high risk animal, which is a weaner, any growing animal, my pregnant ewes, if I have to send them back in there, they're already facing some parasite burdens. So again, the idea is that we want to do fecal egg counts as much as possible, because one, it doesn't cause us production losses, we can get on top of it quickly, but also we don't get paddock contamination, and this is how the vicious spiral goes on. We get big paddock contamination from a worm problem. Now we have a worm problem from the paddock contamination. We want to get on the attack, and this is a great autumn. Currently represents a great time for worms and pasture, so we want to make sure we can take advantage of the pasture and not give any of it away for free to the worms and the production losses. So what my key take homes currently: pasture contamination not controlled by drenching the animal, so we need to make sure we're staying ahead of the game with the worms. Autumn conditions are very favorable for the survival of L3 stages in the environment, not just now, but also, to go through that, we, have a high contamination in the paddock. Come spring, when it cools down and everyone just kind of bunkers down, the worms bunker down a bit, spring, they're going to be in a prime opportunity to have huge burdens coming out. And again, this is a challenge when we've got particularly young weaners, and we need that pasture to grow ahead, because one of the drivers of, weaner performance, or maybe the drivers of poor performance in weaners, is nutrition. They're so interrelated. So what I'm thinking now for guys who've just scanned or just recently scanned is that we're thinking about the lambing paddocks, and for people who've kind of lambing is thinking about what's happening to the weaners. It's all kind of related. So across the, I suppose, the Central West, and in some in my client base, but also talking around the traps, is there's been some really poor scanning results coming through. I just thought I'd touch on this and how I think about it, going forward. So when we think about interpreting scanning results, when someone rings me up or via Zoom, have a bit of a debrief over how their scanning results have gone. This is how I kind of start conceptualizing it. I've got my actuals, and then I've got my, my ideals. So I think about what percentage, as in what the fetus percentage is. I think about what the conception rate is, so how many ewes actually got pregnant. And I think about what the percentage dries are in the group. So When I think about this, because we know that body condition score will drive ovulation rate, will be the biggest driver. So this graph here on the right-hand side is from lifetime ewe management, and basically what we can see is the body condition score of the ewe along this axis and the probability of scanning a dry single or a twin. And we can see here is that we go from 1.5 to 2 to 2.5, that this number of singles go up, but then they go down because as our body condition score goes up, again, the key reason, or one of the key reasons why sheep are better than cattle, is now we start playing for a bonus trial. We start getting multiple ovulations. We can get the twinner, which is fantastic. So straight away, if I think about, in my graph here, and this is all anecdotal, but this is how I, view things, is that red is dries, blue is singles, and green is twins, and this is a percentage of the group. So I think when I talk to clients that when you've got about 10% dries, 30% singles and 60% twinners, I look at that graph and think, you've crushed it. I know that your nutrition has been on point. You've done a fantastic job because you've allowed those ewes to express their full potential in ovulation, and we've got much more singles and twins. Now, for this graph, there'll be some breed differences and differences within breeds and different bloodlines, I know, but just to give you an overarching view. So solid, I think 10% dry rate or less. And then we'll get an even split between twins and singles. I kind of go, okay, you've done pretty well. You've got a good conception rate, but maybe there was a barrier there, whether it was worms, whether it was nutrition that inhibited some of those girls to have that multiple ovulation. As soon as I start seeing this number here, when I see the dry rate going over 10%, in this case 20%, but I've got the single and twin rate ratio right, so my twins are greater than my singles, I straight away think about, there's some problems going on there. And I'll talk about how I think about the problems, but I kind of go from there and go, okay, nutrition must have been reasonable at the very least, because a greater proportion of girls that did ovulate and were served and conceived actually multiple ovulated. So it tells me nutrition was probably strong. There's something else going on. And of course, when we've got the train wrecks, when we've got, significant portions of dry sheep, and then particularly if there's an equal proportion of singles to twins, then I start thinking, well, there could be a lot of things going on at once. So for the vets online, this is from Kim Abbott's book that I've borrowed it from. When we go through the poor scanning results, we have a look here and go straight away. When I'm trying to unpack what's happened, I go, were the ewes mated or were they not mated? So if the ewe was mated, so she cycled and mated, if the rams were sound, done pre-joining ram exams, we're confident in that, then we're looking at either a ewe infertility or early abortion. If a ewe was mated and the rams were not sound, then we've got a ram infertility problem, with the most common one thinking brucellosis. Ewes not mated, but the rams were normal. So the ewe wasn't cycling, but we put a good ram team in. We did the pre-joining ram exams. We had a team ready for 5 weeks of glory. Then we're looking at, ewe and estrus, or, maybe we just didn't have enough rams. Maybe too many watering ponds, too much timber. There was a bit of a spread out going from there. And then if we put the ewes not mated and the rams abnormal, then maybe there was some ram failures in, mating, seasonal weather. So, going from that, like I, interpret those results, and I think, well, this is some results. We can break it down by year because we want to kind of get a better understanding. So, this scanning here, the purples, the yellow tags, the red tags, we can see here in this group here, the singles, that the red tags, had a higher proportion of dries, but also a higher proportion of singles. So I know in this example that I've got, challenges with my younger sheep. So that, again, and this is the great thing, the great opportunity that EID is going to provide us, is that this data will be really easy to obtain, and your scanner will provide it for you. And you don't have to buy panel readers, you don't have to buy any fancy equipment. Your scanner will just send you a CSV file, which is like an Excel file, and you'll have this, and this kind of data analysis. You don't even need to know how to do that. There's people like me and plenty of other really good businesses out there that can help you unpack this. But straight away, I get a little bit of a feeling for what's going on. So thinking about that, some of the scanning results, I'm always asking, if so, why so? If not, why not? What are my recommendations going forward? And these are the things I've gone through this year that I've seen can make a big difference. Doing pre-joining RAM exams, super easy. We did some yesterday. I think we went through. We might have done 220, but it didn't even take us that long, like a morning. you know, pre-joining RAM exams just help us make sure that we can do all those things, and we want to do it, a minimum 6 weeks before joining. Get to tidy up any of those feed issues. We checked for Brusso, we checked for everything, so really easy to do. Pre-joining U exams for younger sheep is looking at critical weights. For for people who are joining out of season, so before December 22, joining ewe lambs, and I think even maidens, teasers, vasectomized rams, again, represents a lot of opportunities to control the controllables and tighten up joining. I think there's also, when we think about scanning results, how do we get them better, or how do we, how can we mitigate them? Then, evaluating the use of, the performance enhancers, which would be, overstim, but also like Regulin, which is taking away the seasonality. And these are some other ideas, if we think, and this is, I was talking to a client in the last week or two with the help of Gordon of Shore Gears, just, thinking about ideas for managing heat stress events. If our sheep are under heat stress, which is actually a lot lower than you think, then what can we do to mitigate that? Can we leave the rams in and scan back to the date? Because I think from the clients across the board, where I see that the losses is that the biggest scanning, poorest scanning results occur when we don't do pre-joining ram exams, we don't go through our U exams, we don't try and take seasonality off the table, and we're not really managing nutrition at optimum levels. And I've kind of seen that. Well, and I'll go the other way and say I've had some clients who've had some epic scanning results this year, despite neighbours not getting the great results. And I think, well, what's the commonality about them? They stack up all those things, and that's the great thing about the sheep game, is you start stacking up all those biological things, and suddenly 1 + 1 = 3. Because this is the bottom line when I trying to debrief scanning results, is like, what were the barriers to that? We can't do anything about the poor scanning result this year, but what we can do and have a complete control from is how we learn from it, and how do we take advantage of it and put things in place next year so we mitigate any losses, but we get on the attack and we get the best results outcome. Because we know that a poor scanning result isn't just a poor scanning result, it's cash flow issues, it's our ability to select, put selection intensity on our flock, which drives genetic gain. These flow ons, the joining part is so important, which is why if we get a poor scanning result, it's so important to debrief that and understand why and what can we control going forward. So going forward, for those who've scanned or scanning, just a fresh reminder that this is the energy needs straight from lifetime ewe management, energy needs of our ewes, and see it a 65 kilo ewe at day 90, which is our scanning date from rams in. We can see that the twins and singles change. Our energy needs changing, and we need to provide for those animals. And of course, during lactation, they go through the roof and then, back down, by about the lambs about 12 to 14 weeks. Because this is why it's so important. The graph hasn't come through fantastic, is that we know that body condition score drives lamb survivability, because it drives lamb birth weight. Lamb birth weight is a key driver of lamb survivability. And we can see here in this graph, the lamb survivability and new body condition score goes through the roof. Not through the roof, sorry, it just improves significantly. And what it means is, this is why it's so important to scan for multiples and use that data to manage accordingly, because anytime there's a steep line, there's an opportunity or threat there in the biological system. So you want to be on the upside of that. And again, controlling the controllables, trying to move forward, is I think about lamb survival in the middle here. What do I need to do? There's certainly influences by your animals, your sire type, pasture monitoring, your body condition score, key one. Again, easy to measure. Lifetime ewe management teaches you that. Scanning for multiples, putting that into a nutrition plan, and if not sure, getting advice on how to do it. Controlling the disease, we know mob size influences it, predator control and shelter, what paddocks we put into. Again, it's all about trying to think about, this time of year, if you've just scanned, is trying to think about, well, What do I need to do now to execute a really good scanning result? Guys, just moving into people who are, if you're getting close to landmarking, just to kind of hit the high notes, what to think about, this time of year, a lot of landmarking. There's an AWI publication about best practice landmarking, but the idea is that if marking a lamb is sheep surgery, then everyone's a sheep surgeon. And what do we think about when we're a surgeon? We think about maximizing hygiene, minimizing stress on our patients, and maximizing recovery time. And to do that, we go through, a landmarking checklist. When do we want to do it? 2 weeks after the last lamb's born, ideally 2 to 8 weeks of age. We know that if we create wounds, bigger wounds on older animals, we've got an increased risk of arthritis. So, there's a nice, easy window for there, 2 weeks after the last lamb, and get it done. And obviously, the technique. Okay, remember, we want to, for tail docking, we want to do that between the 3rd and 4th joint. Super important for managing fly strike, managing prolapse risk, managing cancer risk on ewes, in their lifetime. All these can be found in AWI's website. For technique, we want to be using the right technique in the right place, vaccinating, in the side of the neck there, because that's a low value cut. We want to be using the right gear. Remember, all vaccines only need a 1/4 inch needle. So it's only a tiny needle, so you've got to put in the right place with the right gear, change those needles over every couple of hundred or every break. So, pain relief going forward, what are options? Well, there's, a couple different types of pain relief. There's the local anesthetic group, which is the acute phase, which is the anesthetics. So trisulfan numbnuts, and then we've got, the longer acting analgesics. So that'd be buckalgesic, Meloxi, Butec, and so when I think about it, it's just like going to the dentist. We get a local block. It's good, it's strong, but it's very short acting. Or, we take the Nurofen when we get home, which is the same as the Meloxi or the buckalgesic or the Medicam, and the idea being that when I go to the dentist, I don't want to choose one or the other, I just want both. But of course, one is better than none. So, what are our options for landmarking? We've got our injectable under the skin, lasts 72 hours, fantastic, can be used on a lot of farms, kicks in probably 10 to 15 minutes, lasts a longer time. Downsides, maybe it's another gun at the cradle, but it's more or less functions as another vaccine against pain. We've got Butec or buckalgesic, which is the gel under the lips. Again, takes 10 to 15 minutes in my mind to get absorbed. Again, lasts up to 72 hours. Downsides, it gets a bit gluggy when it's cold. So you need to manage that and keep it warm. And, the other good side is probably you don't have another needle kicking around, but here's some pictures there. Local anesthetic, the numbnuts, and that's when we apply a ring. It's a gun that depresses some local anesthetic in. Again, works really well, really quickly. It does wear off really quickly. So local anesthetics are just muting the iPhone, stops the signal getting transmitted. And of course, trisulfan, the OG of pain relief is that, we spray it on, and it's got two types of local anesthetic in there. So, fantastic for, any kind of wound where there's blood. So mulesing is probably the one we all think about. But, if you don't have a wound, it doesn't work. So if you're using rings, then trisulfan certainly isn't the right product for you. Great, you can use a lot of those products in combination and in different varieties, but yeah, fantastic, all of them. So vaccines, what do I think about? Well, it's all about the prevalence of disease, the cost of disease, the class of animal, and your attitude to risk. Operations are different, so things about do you need good air and things like that. That's where you want to get professional advice. And of course, friendly reminder to everyone that vaccinating is a bit like finding a pair of thongs when you don't have any shoes on. One's better than none, but you don't really get that far without two. Same with vaccines. You need to have 2 shots because mum will give them some immunity. You want to give a mum a vaccine coming up maybe 4 weeks before lambing. One dose is the priming dose, just kind of getting the feel for it, and the body really responds to that second dose. So you need that second dose, and we know from surveys that there's not, a lot of people aren't using that second dose. So you're just not nearly getting the return on investment from that vaccination. You can see the huge response you get there. So EID tags, huge opportunity coming up for the sheep industry. But my comment is, if you are going to start putting tags in, then make sure you get your bucket list from your tag producer. Now, if you don't know what a bucket list is, your tag supplier will. Even if you're not going to use it, just keep it because it's handy down the track. What is a bucket list? Here you say, basically a bucket list is just an Excel file that says the tag inside of their chip in the ear and what is its visual number on the outside. What that means is that over time, if you record that visual number and you go, righto, tag, 220,001 to, 020, that was in the twinners and the rest of them were in the singles, then suddenly you can keep that information and you know what tags are there, because the easiest one would be when you come to classing, that we can draft on that number, and it's really easy because then you're now classing like to like, the singles to singles and the twins to twins. Because remember, those twins, they can be little and their wool certainly is influenced by being born a twin, but that's not their fault. And so, we want to class them together. So there's a really good opportunity at landmarking. Again, you don't have to use this data, but just get it, because trying to find a bucket list down the track is really hard. So wet and drying ewes, for those people coming up to landmarking, it's not all about the lambs. Wet and drying ewes is identifying those ewes that obviously been scanned in lamb, but haven't brought a lamb to the cradle. There's a great video. If you YouTube wetting and drying ewes, you get Gordon Refshauge, who is absolute beast at this, because we know that mothering ability is lowly heritable, highly repeatable. So those bad mums go on to be career bad mums. Again, we don't have enough feed on farm to be giving it away to animals that aren't helping us long term. So we want to identify them and move them on. And finding the good mums by lambed and lost is a great opportunity. So, but I hear this, Tim, I don't have time to, draft off, 10 stray ewes. What do I do with it? Welcome to the advantages of EID. Number one, all you got to do is record that animal, create a hit list, one session file for the whole year called culls. Every time you see a sheep you don't like, you put it on that list. And that's really easy to do, to make those decisions on the spot, or you can just do it all at shearing, run them all through, and you can use a stick reader to draft those animals off. Auto draft is great too. But this is, some really easy things, and we can start doing this by putting EIDs at landmarking and start really trying to get that value over time. Guys, and so they're probably the main things I'm thinking about: what I need to organize, what do I need to order, and coming through to, understanding I'm doing my landmarking, what does it all mean? In a merino, industry averages would be single survivability would be 90%, twin survival would be 70%, so that'd be 140%. I want to recall what paddocks they come from, because the big answer I want is if so, why so, if not, why not? Because this is the debrief process. It's come from out of air forces, but I think it's just fantastic. Is that it's the 3 R's. I actually did one. Ed and I did one just before I started this. We did a bit of fleece weighing. The result was, did we hit our target? If our target was 70% lamb survivability in our twins, did we hit that? Just yes, no. What were the reasons? And the idea is that it's no names, no rank, no blame. It's just straight out what happened. Hey, we ran out of time, we didn't mob size down low enough, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter who's at fault. It's just trying to articulate the reason, because this is, and same idea with the scanning results, landmarking results. I do this at every management time. What did we learn and what are we doing going forward? Because that's the key one. Okay, we got a really good result from tank paddock. Okay, maybe tank paddock, it needs to be the, maid and twinners, the most highest risk animals. Again, it's all trying to find the, systemic learnings on farm. So if you want to leave your farm and go away for a year, you know exactly how to hand that information on. But also as a team, we want to make sure that we're always getting better, incremental gains each year. Guys, I've gone fast and furious. Hopefully, I've brought a few topical things up in this, a few refreshers. So fire away with questions. I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah, over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Tim. Just get my webcam back up. It's now time for question and answer before we finish off today. So if you'd like to drop the question pane down, and then you can type your questions in there, and I'll be able to deliver them to Tim for you. We have one question in there already while we wait for some more, and it's for your debriefing, Tim. Do you recommend using an advisor or just talking to the team at home?
Oh, like having a third party is awesome, but I don't think it's necessary at all, because it's really about a team environment. So I don't think you like if you wanted to have someone in, yeah, maybe that adds a bit of value. They could be like the red team, which is the kind of person who's going to throw some questions. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? So it would add a value to have an advisor to ask those questions, maybe that that haven't come into the scope. But I think the core to the debrief process is just iterative, gains within the business. So doing it in the team, I think, is just really good, because what the most interesting part about the debrief is, it part about the farm practices, but a part about it is building trust with your team. Because if something happens on farm that causes a disagreement, you're creating a framework that we can actually work through that. Because again, the rule is, it's like Fight Club. The first rule about Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. The first rule about debriefing is there's no names, no rank, no blame. So it's not like Tim stuffed up. It's just that fecal egg counts were not done. Full stop. It doesn't have to be any blame. Why not? And then we can just start working through there. So that's how the debrief process really is a team building exercise. Even sounds a bit funny saying that, but it's really just trying to build value in. But to answer the question, long story short, yes, having someone in there to ask some questions to challenge assumptions and bring things to light that might not be thought about and you don't understand adds a ton of value, of course.
Thanks, Tim. The next question, Tim, you mentioned worm counting every few weeks. Do you recommend stopping over winter, and when would you start again if you did?
For sure. Yeah, I think you can, your testing interval, might come out to 6 weeks during winter. But I wouldn't stop. I'd just be, I don't have to, because I'm not dealing with barber's pole as much, because I'm not in the key barber's pole time. That's why it's really important. Like if I'm having a wet summer, I want to be every couple of weeks, because they can explode so quickly. But as soon as the temperature changes, the environment, remember there's environment host factors. As soon as that changes, then we'll be, then I want to increase my frequency interval. Or if I've got pasture contamination and I want to change the interval from there.
Thanks, Tim. Producer online who only has a few ewes, not too many, and is planning on lambing in October this year. How to choose a drench? Which drench would you choose? And what is a sensible way to choose the products and the rationale for treating at high worm egg counts?
Yeah, for sure. So if the producer could just type in where they're from. If you're running a small operation, you are actually at a really high worm risk, because you've got typically you don't have a lot of land.
Bungendore in New South Wales.
Where's Bungendore? Sorry, apologies. Which one?
Canberra.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, Canberra. Okay, great. So
you're at the Google. Thanks.
Sorry, I've never been to Bungendore. Maybe I should. Yeah, so I think if small acreage, I'm thinking the challenges are that it's all about trying to get an appropriate volume. And so for then in a small, so naturally, what are the drenches that you want to work in the absence of it? I want to get drenches with multi-actives. I want to get drenches that I know work, and I want to drench appropriately. So, the challenge if you've got a small holding is that, typically, with the exception of maybe Q drench, there's not a lot of 1 litre containers. So step one is to try and find some other small land holders and go thirds, halves, quarters, eighths in drenches, or vets can prescribe. You can break drenches down if you've got a group of people who will be needing drenches. So multiple actives, using the novels, which is StarTech and Zolvix predominantly, but also where you are, Bungendore, you might just be, I'm just not quite sure which side of Canberra, but you're kind of getting closer. The closer you get down to like the Bega and the South Close, the closer you get to some of that rainfall pattern, summer rainfall patterns. So even that situation, that using things like Barbavac.
North of Canberra near Goulburn, Tim.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so I was going to say for anyone else, listening on small holdings, that I think Barbavax represents a really good opportunity for small holders as well. Yeah, so how would you pick it? It's all about the multiple actives and changing as much as possible and using fecal egg counts to get a hold of it. The challenge, like I said, is that your volume size, which is really hard. If you've got only 20 sheep, it's really hard to buy drenches, because a lot of them in like 1, 5, 20 litre containers. And that's why I said, like, I think joining a group of producers, even though normally I would say every farm is different, but I think when you're in a small holding, you certainly want to see if you can build a relationship with other producers around, so you can buy some of the maybe the heavy hitting or the higher level drenches in a bigger volume, and share that out around. That's a little bit of a specialized question, Fiona. Sorry, I didn't give you a great answer.
That's okay. Someone made a comment that Zolvix Plus is also available in 1 litres.
There you
go. Vaccines, 1 litre containers as well. So
perfect.
That's great feedback. And I suppose the flip side of that would work too. If you knew a larger producer, there's plenty of them around Goulburn, they might not mind you buying a small amount of their largest stock from drench from them. We've certainly done that before for smaller holders.
No, sheep game's a team sport. No, 100%.
What is the best time frame for scanning after a 5-week joining?
Yeah, great question. My comment is typically 85 to 90 days from rams in. So standard issue advice is the day you put your rams in, which is a day completely controlled by you, is to text message or phone him or her who runs the scanning contracting business and book them in straight away, because we know that that your ability to detect twins, singles, and triplets is directly related to the age of scanning. So usually I go 85 days from rams in, but some scanners will want to scan at high 70 days. Some are 85. I'm at 90. So I think that's why I think sending the text message to your scanner and said, hey, my rams are in this date, they're out this date. When can you book me in to give me the best accuracy? And I think that allows your scanner to kind of work it out, but also allows the scanner to build a run, to reduce the cost for you, making sure that, travel costs are reduced if they know in advance when you're scanning.
Next question, Tim. If you wet and dry at landmarking, when is the best time to assess for udder health?
Yep, great. So if you are wet and drying at landmarking, so I'm looking for lambed and lost, but my pre-joining U checks are typically, I'd be doing that 2 months before, 10 weeks, 2 months before joining, because one, I'm trying to wet and drying at landmarking, I'm trying to assess those who've lambed and lost. But the pre-joining U exam would be more further on, coming close to joining, because that's when I really get to see what's happening to the udder, and also to see how many of those U's developed udder abnormalities. There's some really interesting stuff that's come out of MLA called Fit to Join, where they've done some studies based out of Southern Victoria, where they had producers who were following best practice guidelines, but really weren't hitting the kind of high notes they wanted to. And what they found is that used with any form of udder abnormality, and I think it was about 20% difference in lamb survivability. So huge thing. And again, those animals that have got defects from their udders, they might scan perfectly well, but you might not pick them up, till lambed and lost. Hopefully you pick them up then. So udder health, maybe you do that later on. But if I was feeling a ewe at wet and drying, and she had an udder abnormality, you know, but she was lactating. Again, the wand is a great one. That's a wand to record her number. She might still go back with the lambs because she's raising one if she's got an udder at lamb marking, but I've got a number because I know that the chance that, you know, for her to say scan a twin and bring twin to the cradle next year might be reduced. And, you know, we don't have enough resources available to, you know, be wasting that.
Thanks, Tim. Let me just check. We haven't got any more questions through. I think we're just about finished there. Yes, we are. So thank you everyone for those questions. It was great to have participation in question time. I always love lots of responses. So thank you very much, Tim, for the great presentation today. It was wonderful to have you back on our platform, and to the audience for joining us and for your ongoing support.